he had written these books, and I found there's this whole society with people who are basically, the mission is to clear his name, right?
Yes.
And we started just a wonderful dialogue about the play and the true story of Richard III, and we thought we would be able to share that, and we will be doing it. We've got some time this summer. So, Joan, you want to talk a little bit about your books and the approach that you took to them?
Well, I'll start with my first introduction to Richard III is, like many people, was through Shakespeare, and he was the villain I loved to hate. And then I read Sharon K. Kim Sun and Splendor, and I said, well, whoa, wait a minute, this is not the Richard I knew, and I wound up studying more about him, and I became compelled to really dive in deeply, and Richard wouldn't let go of me, and so I ended up writing 2 books, and there'll be a third, and they're about Richard III in the 21st century. And one of the first things conclusions I came to as I studied was that I don't think his nephews were murdered. I think that they survived him. And the reason for that is that there's just no documentation of anything except that they were found to be illegitimate children because Edward IV's marriage was found to be illegitimate, that he had been married before and never divorced or been widowed prior to his marriage to Elizabeth Woodville, and all of his children were therefore illegitimate.
So that's one of the big things. He's known for the guy who killed his nephews, and of course the play takes that to almost unbearable length. And you get to meet the boys and then hear about their murder in the tower. And come to find out, the boys weren't actually murdered. And there's all kinds of interesting stories. Maybe Joan, you could tell us a little bit about some of the things people say about what might have happened to the boys if they were smuggled out, or.
Well, there's still some people who think they were killed or they died prior. Some people think that the older boy, Edward, died of a bone disease, but because they found bones that were buried in the tower, and one of the skulls had a deformed jaw that indicated a bone disease. However, there's no records in contemporary documentation that he was ill at all. So, and that would have shown up. And anyway, there's also evidence of a pretender, that Henry VII, the guy that you see, Richmond, who ends up being victorious in victorious in the battlefield and became Henry VII. He had him executed as a commoner called Perkin Warbeck, but he claimed to be Richard of York, which was the younger son. So there's enough evidence to show that maybe at least one of the boys survived Richard up until 1499 when he was executed. So it's hard to separate rumor and fact. But there's a lot of rumor, but there's very little fact that the boys died.
Why would there be an absence of records, given that the Brits and their lineage and all that is just so rigidly tracked? Why would there be an absence of records about any of this, do you think?
Well, the theory is that once they were declared bastards and they couldn't inherit title, they became persons of non-interest. So there wouldn't be necessarily records of them afterwards. And Richard was already king.
Well, since they were bastards, there would be no interest in killing them, would there?
Not from Richard's point of view. But when Henry became king, one of the things that was enacted when Richard became king was a document called Titulus Regius, which declared all of Edward IV's issue as illegitimate, and that they could not inherit the crown. Now, he had many daughters, and Henry married Elizabeth of York, Edward IV's oldest daughter, and he revoked Titulus Regius. In fact, he had all copies destroyed, except there was a copy of it in the Croyland Chronicles, which had Titulus Regius in it. So, and that was found later, after Elizabeth I even.
Of course, the play not only touches on the killing of the children, but also you watch Richard and Buckingham talking about how they're going to plant the seed in the public mind. So they themselves would cry for Richard himself, not the two boys.
Was Richard in reality deformed?
No. He actually was, the only record of anything about him physically was that he was short. He was a soldier. He fought in battles. He was a respected general, and in fact, he died fighting bravely. Everyone, even his enemies, said he died bravely fighting in the Battle of Bosworth, where he was killed. But we don't actually. They may have found his remains, and there's a dig for him going on now in Leicester. And the Great Fires, they don't own it anymore, but it's a municipal lot. And if his bones are found, we may know how tall he was, and know whether he was deformed or not. But he wasn't, according to contemporary records.
Didn't he put them in the tower? Didn't he put the boys in the tower actually to protect them, rather than to imprison them?
Well, it was also royal apartments, and Edward was going to be crowned king. He was already named Edward V, and Richard was his protector, and he was going to be crowned, so he had the two boys in the tower in the garden apartments, in the royal apartments. And they were going, and after they were found to be illegitimate, they stayed there until they disappeared. And my theory is, based on circumstantial evidence, is that Richard got them out to protect them.